In an age where electronics are becoming a bigger part of the world, the next generation of families is facing some greater challenges. You would rarely find one of the young minds of the world to not go a day without some form of screen time. Of course, there are pluses and minuses to electronic use. We'll discuss that on today's Weekend Connection. Weekend Connection airs each week at this time. I'm Bennett Roberts, and it's time to get connected. Our guest today is Mr. Adam Holz, the Director of Media and Culture at Focus on the Family, an organization that has recognized the importance of Christian values in the family and seeks to help every home solidify those same values. Mr. Adam, welcome to the Weekend Connection.
Bennett, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I'm sure there are those in our audience that are aware of the potential use and misuse of technology. Nearly everything in our devices is set up to capture our attention and to lead us down
Yes.
the wrong paths like laziness or procrastination, for example. So, Adam,
Yes.
how can we prevent ourselves from falling into unhealthy screen habits?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. And I think even though we often frame this as an issue that kids have, the reality is that we as adults and parents, statistics say and studies show, have the same problems, right? And so we have to, I think, approach technology with a sense of active intentionality, Bennett, that our relationship with this, if we're not careful and intentional, is one where we get sucked into that sort of compulsive, mindless use. And I'm reminded of something that a man named Tim Kendall said. Tim was the president of Pinterest for a while, and in the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma, he talked about how when he worked for Pinterest, what their goal was. And he said, our goal is to get you to give us as much of your life as you possibly can and as you're willing to surrender. And I think when we frame it that way, that when we understand that the people who create these apps, who create social media, really intend to draw us in as deeply as we will allow them to go, that's a starting point for understanding how, significant this issue in our lives is.
I like the way you put it. I think you used the words active intentionality.
Yes, that's right.
Would you care
Yeah.
to explain some of those phrases?
Well, I think that if we have ever tried to make a change in our life, and I'm going to assume that there are more people out there who recognize that maybe their engagement with media is unhealthy or out of control or not where they want it to be than those who are saying, yep, got this totally under control. But I would compare it to two other issues that really deal with consumption. And when we talk about dealing with how we relate to our phones and social media, it really is about confronting the fact that we're being invited to consume something, right? And so if you have ever either had to make a budget or realized you needed to lose some weight, it's not enough to just say, well, I want to save some money or I don't want to be fat anymore. We have to have an intentional plan that we put into place that enables us to change our habits, right? And so I think it's not enough to say, well, we're just going to get off our devices. For most of us, we're going to have to be a lot more intentional than that. And I think as a guy, sometimes I'm in an all or nothing world. I want to solve the problem completely in one fell swoop. But I think it will require us making smaller, bite-sized changes where we can really begin to change our relationship with technology. Maybe that's we're not going to have phones at the dinner table, or when everybody gets home from work and school at night, we're going to have a period of time that everybody gets off their devices. Maybe from 5 to 7, we're not on our phones. Or, you got to pick something that fits your family, but beginning to take those small steps back to clawing back that time that we give to our devices.
And steps actually have to be taken. It can't just end in a belief.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I think the other thing, and my wife always points this out, it's not about giving up something, but the other part of intentionality is what are we going to do to fill that time? And especially if we're trying to help our kids here, it's not enough to say, okay, we're getting off our devices. If they have developed a compulsive or dependent relationship with them, we're going to help them navigate, okay, what are we going to fill that time with? What are we going to do instead?
Hmm.
And I actually think that can be part of our motivation too, helping us sort of get righteously angry about the fact that we waste so much time on these things and saying, what if we took that time and invested it in something that is really meaningful? How
Right.
could we invest that time in a way that really has a redemptive impact on our lives and on our relationships with people?
Well, would you mind answering this? What can parents do to encourage those good screen habits with their child?
Well, I think you have to set that example yourself to begin with. And I think it really does involve setting boundaries, and boundaries have to do with where, when, and what. Where are we going to be on our phones? When are we going to be on them? And what are we going to be doing with them? And so understanding that, maybe having your kids have free access to their phones in their bedrooms at night is a recipe for, at best, a lot of extra usage. And at worst, you don't know what they might be looking at. And so really establishing those boundaries and setting them in a way that our kids know what the expectations are. And the reality is we all drift out of that, right? If you've ever dieted or budgeted, changing those habits takes time. So we may need a reset every now and then where it's like, okay, we've drifted out of control again. Let's do this. And I think the more that families can do it together, it's not just something that parents are imposing, but you know what? Mom and dad are going to do this right alongside you, and we're going to do it
Hmm.
together. I think that has a much greater chance of success over the long haul, Bennett.
I like that. When, where, and what. Those are the boundaries that are set for you and for everybody in your family.
Yep.
Would you suggest any resources for a parent that needs to set those boundaries, that is looking for more insight into this?
Yeah. Yeah. We have resources at pluggedin.com, and you can go to our blog. We write a lot about technology there. If you want to learn about social media or TikTok or screen time limits, searches on all of those things will yield our blog articles. We also have a new book out that our department wrote together. It's called Becoming a Screen Savvy Family. It's published by Tyndale and distributed through Focus on the Family, and you can find that at focusonthefamily.com in our bookstore. And we'll talk about, I think, the big picture strategy, where we want to get to, as well as some of these tactical considerations like you and I have been talking about today.
Okay, so that was pluggedin.com and Becoming a Screen Savvy Christian, and that was the name of the book
Becoming
title?
a Screen Savvy Family is the name of
Family.
the book.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. This is Adam Holtz, the Director of Media and Culture at Focus on the Family. And shifting more into recent news, I
Yes,
I was brought to the attention that Australia has taken a big step of limitation in banning
yes,
social media for anyone under the age of 16. And
yeah,
and it has become more apparent over the years that social media is starting to slowly gear itself toward the younger generations.
oh
Um,
yeah.
how could you say that this would benefit the people and more so the youth of Australia?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. They've got a year for social media companies to get ready for this, and they're going to make them responsible for verifying age. And that has always been the big sticking point, and the social media
Hmm.
companies have pushed back and said, we can't do this, and Australia has said, figure it out. So um, there's an increasing consensus in the scientific community that kids shouldn't have access to social media before the age of 16. And there are a number of reasons for that, but we've been seeing over the last decade or so a rise in increasing anxiety, increasing depression, and increases in
Hmm.
increases in suicidal ideation. And as social science researchers have tried to figure that out, there are a number of reasons for that. But maybe one of the biggest ones for young people, for preteens and tweens, those who really shouldn't be on this, is just the issue of comparison. That when you're an adolescent and a young adolescent, you want to know that you fit in, you want to know that people like you want to know that you're not, weird. And the reality is that comparison process is just part of growing up. But when kids are thrown into the world of social media, we get everybody's best life depicted online. And it's
Mhm.
easy for adolescents to look at somebody else's life and say, oh man, they are so much prettier than I am, or they've got so much more money than I do, or they've got a better life than I do. And so even though social media was initially intended to help connect us, it can have exactly the opposite effect. It can leave some kids feeling alienated. The other thing that happens is if they see a bunch of their friends talking about something and they didn't get invited to a party or to an event, it can really make them feel left out of the equation. Again, those are battles that adolescents have fought for a long time, but social media really amplifies them. And another thing that comes into play here is that bullying gets amplified into cyberbullying. And
Mm.
so back in the day, if you got picked on, maybe there were a few people that saw it, maybe a few people talked about it, but it was really more limited contextually to that moment. But now, if somebody gets bullied online or an inappropriate picture is distributed, they can be victimized and traumatized over and over. So that's another reason why social media is potentially really a negative thing for kids. Again, there's a growing sense that we need to limit kids' access before the age of 16. And even that is a somewhat arbitrary number. And I think that we'll see a moment in our culture down the road where we look back at allowing kids to be on social media sort of the same way we thought about cigarettes in the 1950s and 60s. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Everybody smokes, no problem. And then we learned the hard way, oh, there's some very real correlations here with horrible outcomes. And I think that we have a parallel process happening with our understanding of social media as it relates to teenagers.
Yeah, a lot of insecurity and inappropriate material that can be amplified, and even then, once you are able to find that in your child's social media, it may be too late. They've already been exposed to it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think, with relationship to that, as our kids move through their teen years, we also probably want to give them some agency to make some of those decisions themselves. And I'm talking, by the time they are 15, 16, 17, so that when they leave our homes, they've had some practice doing that. But it really is not something that, an 11 or 12 or 13-year-old needs to be doing because there's so many risks here,
Yeah.
Bennett.
I also saw that Australia's Commissioner of Electronic Safety spoke with some of those social media companies, and as of September of 2024, 84% of 8 to 12-year-olds in the country were already on social media, and the majority
Yep,
had their parents help to set it up. So,
yep.
looking at that, how involved should a parent be in their child's devices or social media?
Well, I think they should be very involved. I think if you're not involved, you don't really have any idea what your kids are engaging with. And there are parental control features on both phones and on the social media platforms themselves. And you can come to pluggedin.com. We've got tutorials on how to set a number of those up. But I think that those parental controls and filters can give us a false sense of security too. I
Mhm.
think it's important for us to really know our kids' hearts, right? It's not just about we've got to make sure all the fences are in place, but really knowing them and knowing what their vulnerabilities are will enable us to relate to them as they get older. We want to protect them, definitely, but we also want to engage with them in a way that they know we are for them and that we care about them and that we're not just trying to be a police officer, basically.
Mhm.
So I think understanding your kids' interests and letting them know that if they see something, if they experience something online that makes them uncomfortable, or even if they, really succumb to something that they know they shouldn't have, that they can always come to us, and we
Yeah.
want to help them with that.
What can parents do to connect with their kids on a deeper level?
I think one of the best things you can do is to pay attention to what your kids are interested in. And with regard to media, and I'll broaden it out just from smartphones and social media and entertainment, and to the extent that you can enter into the things they're interested in together, you're building relationships. And I think to the extent that you can enter into your kids' entertainment world and find those places where there's something you can do together, that becomes a win, right? It becomes a relationship building thing, so that when you have to say no, you can also say, we need to say no to this, but remember, here are the things that we say yes to and the things that we do together. There are times you have to be bad cop as a parent, but I think that we can limit the times that we're bad cop by doing that relationship building together as a family.
All right, and we've been speaking with Adam from Focus on the Family, and thank you so much for being able to be here and share this insight with us.
You bet. Thank you, Bennett.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.